After our conditions were known, many villagers came of their own accord and brought their money with them. Not all, but many. The board really believes that those hunted and harried paupers out there were not only willing to strip themselves to pay boxer damages, whether they owed them or not, but were sentimentally eager to do it. Mr. Ament says, in his letter, the villagers were extremely grateful because I brought no foreign soldiers, and were glad to settle on the terms proposed. Some of those people know more about theology than they do about human nature. I do not remember encountering even a Christian who was glad to pay money he did not owe, and as for a Chinaman doing it, why, dear me, the thing is unthinkable. We have all seen Chinamen, many Chinamen, but not that kind. It is a new kind, an invention of the Bourdain soldiers. Concerning the collections, what was the one-third extra? Money due? No, was it a theft then? Putting aside the one-third extra, what was the remainder of the exacted indemnity, if collected from persons not known to owe it and without Christian and civilized forms of procedure? Was it theft? Was it robbery? In America, it would be that. In Christian Europe, it 285 would be that. I have great confidence in Dr. Smith's judgment concerning this detail, and he calls it theft and extortion even in China, for he was talking about the 13 times at the time that he gave it that strong name. It is his idea that, when you make guilty and innocent villagers pay the appraised damages, and then make them pay 13 times that, besides, the 13 stand for theft and extortion. Then what does one-third extra stand for? Will he give that one-third a name? Is it modified theft and extortion? Is that it? The girl who was rebuked for having borne an illegitimate child excused herself by saying, "But it is such a little one." When the 13 times extra was alleged, it stood for theft and extortion, in Dr. Smith's eyes, and he was shocked. But when Dr. Ament showed that he had taken only a third extra, instead of 13-fold, Dr. Smith was relieved, content, happy. I declare I cannot imagine why. That editor quoted at the head of this article was happy about it, too. I cannot think why. He thought I ought to make for the Amen corner and formulate a prompt apology. To whom, and for what, it is too deep for me. To Dr. Smith, the 13-fold extra, clearly 286, stood for theft and extortion, and he was right, distinctly right, indisputably right. He manifestly thinks that when it got scaled away down to a mere one-third, a little thing like that was something other than theft and extortion. Why? Only the board knows. I will try to explain this difficult problem so that the board can get an idea of it. If a pauper owes me $1, and I catch him unprotected and make him pay me $14, 13 of it is theft and extortion. If I make him pay only $1.33 and a third cents, the 33 and a third cents are theft and extortion just the same. I will put it in another way, still simpler. If a man owes me one dog, any kind of a dog, the breed is of no consequence and I but let it go, the board would never understand it. It can't understand these involved and difficult things. But if the board could understand, then I could furnish some more instruction, which is this. The one-third, obtained by theft and extortion, is tainted money and cannot be purified even by defraying church expenses and supporting widows and orphans with it. It has to be restored to the people it was taken from. Also, there is another view of these things. By our Christian code of morals and law, the whole $1. 33 $1.3, if taken from a man not formally proven to have committed the damage the dollar represents, is theft and extortion. It cannot be honestly used for any purpose at all. It must be handed back to the man it was taken fro. Is there no way, then, to justify these thefts and extortions and make them clean and fair and honorable? Yes, there is. It can be done. It has been done. It continues to be done by revising the 10 Commandments and bringing them down to date, for use in pagan lands, for example. Thou shalt not steal except when it is the custom of the country. This way out is recognized and approved by all the best authorities, including the board. I will cite witnesses. The newspaper cutting, above, Dr. Ament declares that all the collections which he made were approved by the Chinese officials. The editor is satisfied. Dr. Ament's cable to Dr. Smith, all collections received approval Chinese officials. Dr. Ament is satisfied. Letters from 8 clergymen all to the same effect. Dr. Ament merely did as the Chinese do, so they are satisfied. Mr. Ward of the Independent. The Rev. Dr. Washington Gladden. I have mislaid the letters of these gentlemen and cannot quote their words, but they are of the satisfied. The Rev. Dr. Smith, in his open letter, published in the Tribune, The whole procedure is in accordance with a custom among the Chinese of holding a village responsible for wrongs suffered in that village, and especially making the head man of the village accountable for wrongs committed there. Dr. Smith is satisfied, which means that the board is satisfy the head man. Why then this poor rascal, innocent or guilty, must pay the whole bill if he cannot squeeze it out of his poor devil neighbors. But indeed he can be depended upon to try, even to the skinning them of their last brass farthing, their last rag of clothing, their last ounce of food. He can be depended upon to get the indemnity out of them, though it costs stripes and blows, blood, tears, and flesh. The tale of the king and his treasurer. How strange and remote and romantic and oriental and Arabian nighty it all seems and is. It brings back the old forgotten tales, and we hear the king say to his treasurer, "Bring me 30,000 gold tamans." "Allah preserve us, sire, the treasury is empty." "Do you hear? Bring the money in 10 days. Else send me your head in a basket." "I hear and obey." The treasurer summons the head men of 100 villages and says to one, "Bring me 100 gold tamans." To another, "Bring me 500. To another, "Bring 1,000. In 10 days, your head is the forfeit." Your slaves kiss your feet? Ah, high and mighty Lord, be merciful to our hard-pressed villagers. They are poor, they are naked, they starve. Oh, these impossible sums, even the half. Go, grind it out of them, crush it out of them, turn the blood of the fathers, the tears of the mothers, the milk of the babes to money, or take the consequences. Have you heard? 289. His will be done, who is the fount of love and mercy and compassion, who layeth this heavy burden upon us by the hand of his anointed servants. Blessed be his holy name. The father shall bleed, the mother shall faint for hunger, the babe shall perish at the dry breast. The chosen of God have commanded, it shall be as they say. I am not meaning to object to the substitution of pagan customs for Christian, here and there and now and then, when the Christian ones are inconvenient. No, I like it and admire it. I do it myself. And I admire the alertness of the board in watching out for chances to trade board morals for Chinese morals and get the best of the swap. For I cannot endure those people, they are yellow, and I have never considered yellow becoming. I have always been like the board, perfectly well-meaning, but destitute of the moral sense. Now, one of the main reasons why it is so hard to make the board understand that there is no moral difference between a big filch and a little filch, but only a legal one, is that vacancy in its makeup. Morally, there are no degrees in stealing. The commandment merely says, "Thou shalt not steal," and stops there. It doesn't recognize any difference between stealing a third and stealing 13-fold. If I could think of a way to put it before the board in such a plain and the watermelons. I have it now. Many years ago, when I was studying for the gallows, I had a dear comrade, a youth who was not in my line, but still a thoroughly 290 good fellow, though devious. He was preparing to qualify for a place on the board, for there was going to be a vacancy by superannuation in about 5 years. This was down south in the slavery days. It was the nature of the Negro then, as now, to steal watermelons. They stole 3 of the melons of an adoptive brother of mine, the only good ones he had. I suspected 3 of a neighbor's Negroes, but there was no proof. And besides, the watermelons in those Negroes, private patches, were all green and small, and not up to indemnity standard. But in the private patches of 3 other Negroes, there were a number of competent melons. I consulted with my comrade, the understudy of the board. He said that if I would approve his arrangements, he would arrange. I said, "Consider me the board, I approve, arrange." So he took a gun and went and collected 3 large melons for my brother on the half-shell and one over. I was greatly pleased and asked, "Who gets the extra one?" "Widows and orphans." "A good idea, too. Why didn't you take 13? It would have been wrong, a crime in fact, theft and extortion. What is the 1/3 extra, the odd melon, the same?" It caused him to reflect, but there was no result. The justice of the peace was a stern man. On the trial, he found fault with the scheme and required us to explain upon what we based our strange conduct, as he called it. The understudy said, 291, on the custom of the niggers, they all do it. The justice forgot his dignity and descended to sarcasm. Custom of the niggers, are our morals so inadequate that we have to borrow of niggers? Then he said to the jury, 3 melons were owing. They were collected from persons not proven to owe them. This is theft. They were collected by compulsion. This is extortion. A melon was added for the widows and orphans. It was owed by no one. It is another theft, another extortion. Return it whence it came, with the others. It is not permissible here to apply to any object goods dishonestly obtained, not even to the feeding of widows and orphans, for that would be to put a shame upon charity and dishonor it. He said it in open court before everybody, and to me it did not seem very kind. A clergyman in a letter to me reminds me with a touch of reproach that many of the missionaries are good men, kind-hearted, earnest, devoted to their work. Certainly they are, no one is disputing it. Instead of many, he could have said almost all, and still said the truth, no doubt. I know many missionaries. I have met them all about the globe, and have known only one or two who could not fill that bill in answer to that description. Almost all comes near to being a proportion and a description applicable also to lawyers, authors, editors, merchants, manufacturers, in fact, to most guilds and vocations. Without a doubt, Dr. Ament did what he believed to be right, and I concede that when a 292 man is doing what he believes to be right, there is argument on his side. I differ with Dr. Ament, but that is only because he got his training from the board and I got mine outside. Neither of us is responsible, altogether. Recapitulation. But there is no need to sum up. Mr. Ament has acknowledged the one-third extra. No other witness is necessary. The Rev. Dr. Smith has carefully considered the act and labeled it with a stern name, and his verdict seems to have no flaw in it. The morals of the act are Chinese, but are approved by the board, and by some of the clergy and some of the newspapers, as being a valuable improvement upon Christian ones, which leaves me with a closed mouth, though with a pain in my heart. Is the American board on trial? Do I think that Dr. Ament and certain of his fellow missionaries are as bad as their conduct? No, I do not. They are the product of their training. And now that I understand the whole case, and where they got their ideals, and that they are merely subordinates and subject to authority, I comprehend that they are rather accessories than principals, and that their acts only show faulty heads curiously trained, not bad hearts. Mainly, as it seems to me, it is the American board that is on trial. And again, it is a case of the head, not of the heart. 293 That it has a heart which has never harbored an evil intention, no one will deny, no one will question. The board's history can silence any challenge on that score. The board's heart is not in court. It is its head that is on trial. It is a sufficiently strange head. Its ways baffle comprehension. Its ideas are like no one else's. Its methods are novelties to the practical world. Its judgments are surprises. When one thinks it is going to speak and must speak, it is silent. When one thinks it ought to be silent and must be silent, it speaks. Put your finger where you think it ought to be, it is not there. Put it where you think it ought not to be, there you find it. When its servant in China seemed to be charging himself with amazing things, in a reputable journal, a dispatch which was copied into many other papers, the board was as silent about it as any dead man could have been who was informed that his house was burning over his head. An exchange of cablegrams could have enabled it, within 2 days, to prove to the world possibly that the damaging dispatch had not proceeded from the mouth of its servant. Yet it sat silent and asked no questions about the matter. It was silent during 38 days. Then the dispatch came into prominence again. It chanced that I was the occasion of it. A break in the stillness followed. In what form? An exchange of cablegrams, resulting in proof that the damaging dispatch had not been authorized? No, in the form of an open letter by the corresponding Secretary 294 of the American Board, the Rev. Dr. Smith, in which it was argued that Dr. Ament could not have said and done the things set forth in the dispatch. Surely, this was bad politics. A repudiating telegram would have been worth more than a library of argument. An extension of the silence would have been better than the open letter, I think. I thought so at the time. It seemed to me that mistakes enough had been made and harm enough done. I thought it questionable policy to publish the letter, for I did not think it likely that Dr. Ament would disown the dispatch, and I telegraphed that to the Rev. Dr. Smith. Personally, I had nothing against Dr. Ament, and that is my attitude yet. Once more it was a good time for an extension of the silence. But no, the board has its own ways, and one of them is to do the unwise thing when occasion offers. After having waited 56 days, it cabled to Dr. Ament. No one can divine why it did so then, instead of 56 days earlier. It got a fatal reply and was not aware of it. That was that curious confession about the one-third extra. Its application, not to the propagation of the gospel, but only to church expenses, support of widows and orphans, and on top of this confession, that other strange one revealing the dizzying fact that our missionaries, who went to China to teach Christian morals and justice, had adopted pagan morals and justice in their place. That cablegram was dynamite. It seems odd that the board did not see that that revelation made the case far worse than it was before. For there was a saving doubt, before a doubt which was a Gibraltar for strength, and should have been carefully left undisturbed. Why did the board allow that revelation to get into print? Why did the board not suppress it and keep still? But no, in the board's opinion, this was once more the time for speech. Hence Dr. Smith's latest letter to me, suggesting that I speak also a letter which is a good enough letter, barring its 9 defects, but is another evidence that the board's head is not as good as its heart. A missionary is a man who is pretty nearly all heart, else he would not be in a calling which requires of him such large sacrifices of one kind and another. He is made up of faith, zeal, courage, sentiment, emotion, enthusiasm, and so he is a mixture of poet, devotee, and knight-errant. He exiles himself from home and friends, and the scenes and associations that are dearest to him, patiently endures discomforts, privations, discouragements, goes with good pluck into dangers which he knows may cost him his life, and when he must suffer death, willingly makes that supreme sacrifice for his cause. Sometimes the headpiece of that kind of a man can be of an inferior sort, and error of judgment can result as we have seen. Then, for his protection, as it seems to me, he ought to have at his back a board able to know a blunder when it sees one, and prompt to bring him back upon his right course when he strays from it. That is to say, I think the captain of a ship ought to understand navigation. Whether he does or not, he will have to take a captain's share of the blame, if the crew bring the vessel to grief. Yeah. Thomas Brackett Reed. He wore no shell. His ways were frank and open, and the road to his large sympathies was straight and unobstructed. His was a nature which invited affection compelled it, in fact and met it halfway. Hence he was Tom to the most of his friends, and to half of the nation. The abbreviating of such a man's name is a patent of nobility, and is conferred from the heart. Mr. Reed had a very strong and decided character, and he may have had enemies. I do not know. If he had them outside of politics, they did not know the man. He was transparently honest and honorable, there were no furtivenesses about him, and whoever came to know him trusted him and was not disappointed. He was wise, he was shrewd and alert, he was a clear and capable thinker, a logical reasoner, and a strong and convincing speaker. His manner was easy and engaging. His speeches sparkled with felicities of phrasing thrown off without apparent effort, and when he needed the happy help of humor, he had a mine of it as deep and rich as Kimberley to draw from. His services to his country were great, and they were gratefully acknowledged. I cannot remember back to a time when he was not Tom Reed to me, nor to a time when he would have been offended at being so addressed by me. Cannot remember back to a time when I could let him alone in an after-dinner speech if he was present, nor to a time when he did not take my extravagances concerning him and misstatements about him in good part, nor yet to a time when he did not pay them back with usury when his turn came. The last speech he made was at my birthday dinner at the end of November, when naturally I was his text. My last word to him was in a letter the next day. A day later, I was illustrating a fantastic article on art with his portrait, among others a portrait now, to be laid reverently away among the jests that begin in humor and end in pathos. These things happened only 8 days ago, and now he is gone from us, and the nation is speaking of him as one who was. It seems incredible, impossible. Such a man, such a friend, seems to us a permanent possession. His vanishing from our midst is unthinkable as was the vanishing of the campanile that had stood for 1,000 years and was turned to dust in a moment. I have no wish at this time to enter upon light and humorous reminiscences connected with yachting voyages with Mr. Reed in northern and southern seas, nor with other recreations in his company in other places. They do not belong in this paper. They do not invite me, they would jar upon me. I have only wished to say how fine and beautiful was his life and character, and to take him by the hand and say good-bye, as to a fortunate friend who has done well his work and goes a pleasant journey. The finished book. On finishing Joan of Arc. Paris, 1895. Do you know that shock? I mean when you come, at your regular hour, into the sick room where you have watched for months, and find the medicine bottles all gone, the night table removed, the bed stripped, the furniture set stiffly to rights, the windows up, the room cold, stark, vacant, and you catch your breath. Do you know that shock? The man who has written a long book has that experience the morning after he has revised it for the last time, seen the bearers convey it from the house, and sent it away to the printer. He steps into his study at the hour established by the habit of month's end, he gets that little shock. All the litter and the confusion are gone. The piles of dusty reference books are gone from the chairs, the maps from the floor. The chaos of letters, manuscripts, notebooks, paper knives, pipes, matches, photographs, tobacco jars, and cigar boxes is gone from the writing table. The furniture is back where it used to be in the long ago. The housemaid, forbidden the place for 5 months, has been there and tidied it up and scoured it clean and made it repellent and awful. I stand here this morning, contemplating this desolation, and I realize that if I would bring back the 300 spirit that made this hospital homelike and pleasant to me, I must restore the aids to lingering dissolution to their wonted places, and nurse another patient through, and send it forth for the last rites, with many or few to assist there as may happen, and that I will do. As regards patriotism, about 1900, it is agreed in this country that if a man can arrange his religion so that it perfectly satisfies his conscience, it is not incumbent upon him to care whether the arrangement is satisfactory to anyone else or not. In Austria and some other countries, this is not the case. There the state arranges a man's religion for him, he has no voice in it himself. Patriotism is merely a religion love of country, worship of country, devotion to the country's flag and honor and welfare. In absolute monarchies, it is furnished from the throne, cut and dried, to the subject. In England and America, it is furnished, cut and dried, to the citizen by the politician and the newspaper. The newspaper and politician manufactured patriot often gags in private over his dose, but he takes it and keeps it on his stomach the best he can. Blessed are the meek. Sometimes, in the beginning of an insane, shabby political upheaval, he is strongly moved to revolt, but he doesn't do it, he knows better. He knows that his maker would find it out, the maker of his patriotism, the windy and incoherent $6 sub-editor of his village newspaper, and would bray 302 out in print and call him a traitor. And how dreadful that would be. It makes him tuck his tail between his legs and shiver. We all know, the reader knows it quite well, that 2 or 3 years ago 9/10 of the human tales in England and America performed just that act. Which is to say, 9/10 of the patriots in England and America turned traitor to keep from being called traitor. Isn't it true? You know it to be true. Isn't it curious? Yet it was not a thing to be very seriously ashamed of. A man can seldom, very seldom fight a winning fight against his training. The odds are too heavy. For many a year, perhaps always, the training of the two nations had been dead against independence in political thought, persistently inhospitable toward patriotism, manufactured on a man's own premises, patriotism reasoned out in the man's own head, and fire-assayed and tested and proved in his own conscience. The resulting patriotism was a shop-worn product procured at second hand. The patriot did not know just how or when or where he got his opinions, neither did he care, so long as he was with what seemed the majority, which was the main thing, the safe thing, the comfortable thing. Does the reader believe he knows 3 men who have actual reasons for their pattern of patriotism and can furnish them? Let him not examine, unless he wants to be disappointed. He will be likely to find that his men got their patriotism at the public trough and had no hand in its preparation themselves. 303 training does wonderful things. It moved the people of this country to oppose the Mexican War, then moved them to fall in with what they supposed was the opinion of the majority. Patriotism is the customary patriotism and go down there and fight. Before the Civil War, it made the North indifferent to slavery and friendly to the slave interest. In that interest, it made Massachusetts hostile to the American flag, and she would not allow it to be hoisted on her state house. In her eyes, it was the flag of a faction. Then by and by, training swung Massachusetts the other way, and she went raging south to fight under that very flag and against that aforetime protected interest of hers. There is nothing that training cannot do. Nothing is above its reach or below it. It can turn bad morals to good, good morals to bad. It can destroy principles, it can recreate them. It can debase angels to men and lift men to angelship. And it can do any one of these miracles in a year, even in 6 months. Then men can be trained to manufacture their own patriotism. They can be trained to labor it out in their own heads and hearts, and in the privacy and independence of their own premises. It can train them to stop taking it by command, as the Austrian takes his religion. Dr. Loeb's incredible discovery. Experts in biology will be apt to receive with some skepticism the announcement of Dr. Jacques Loeb of the University of California as to the creation of life by chemical agencies. Dr. Loeb is a very bright and ingenious experimenter, but a consensus of opinion among biologists would show that he is voted rather as a man of lively imagination than an inerrant investigator of natural phenomena. New York Times, March 2d. I wish I could be as young as that again. Although I seem so old now, I was once as young as that. I remember, as if it were but 30 or 40 years ago, how a paralyzing consensus of opinion accumulated from experts assetting around, about brother experts who had patiently and laboriously cold chiseled their way into one or another of nature's safe deposit vaults, and were reporting that they had found something valuable was a plenty for me. It settled it. But it isn't so now, no. Because, in the drift of the years, I by found out that a consensus examines a new thing with its feelings rather oftener than with its mind. You know yourself that that is so. Do those people examine with feelings that are friendly to evidence? You know they don't. It is the other way about. They do the examining by the light of their prejudices now, is that true? With curious results, yes. So curious that you wonder the consensuses do not go out of the business. 305. Do you know of a case where a consensus won a game? You can go back as far as you want to, and you will find history furnishing you this. Until now, unwritten maxim for your guidance and profit. Whatever new thing a consensus coppers colloquial for bets against, bet your money on that very card, and do not be afraid. There was that primitive steam engine ages back, in Greek times, a consensus made fun of it. There was the Marquis of Worcester's steam engine, 250 years ago, a consensus made fun of it. There was Fulton's steamboat of a century ago. A French consensus, including the great Napoleon, made fun of it. There was Priestley with his oxygen. A consensus scoffed at him, mobbed him, burned him out, banished him. While a consensus was proving, by statistics and things, that a steamship could not cross the Atlantic, a steamship did it. A consensus consisting of all the medical experts in Great Britain made fun of Jenner and inoculation. A consensus consisting of all the medical experts in France made fun of the stethoscope. A consensus of all the medical experts in Germany made fun of that young doctor, his name? Forgotten by all but doctors now, revered now by doctors alone, who discovered and abolished the cause of that awful disease, puerperal fever, made fun of him, reviled him, hunted him, persecuted him, broke his heart, killed him. Electric, telegraph, Atlantic cable, telephone, all toys, and of no practical value verdict of the consensuses. Geology, paleontology, evolution all brushed into space by a consensus of theological experts, comprising 306 all the preachers in Christendom, assisted by the Duke of Argyll, and at first the other scientists. And do look at Pasteur and his majestic honor roll of prodigious benefactions. Damned each and every one of them in its turn by frenzied and ferocious consensuses of medical and chemical experts comprising, for years, every member of the tribe in Europe, damned without even a casual look at what he was doing, and he pathetically imploring them to come and take at least one little look before making the damnation eternal. They short his life by their malignities and persecutions, and thus robbed the world of the further and priceless services of a man who along certain lines and within certain limits had done more for the human race than any other one man in all its long history. A man whom it had taken the expert brotherhood 10,000 years to produce, and whose mate and match the brotherhood may possibly not be able to bring forth and assassinate in another 10,000. The preacher has an old and tough reputation for bullheaded and unreasoning hostility to new light. Why, he is not in it with the doctor, nor perhaps with some of the other breeds of experts that sit around and get up the consensuses and squelch the new things as fast as they come from the hands of the plotters, the searchers, the inspired dreamers, the pastors that come bearing pearls to scatter in the consensus sty. This is warm work. It puts my temperature up to 106 and raises my pulse to the limit. It always works just so when the red rag of a consensus jumps 307 my fence and starts across my pasture. I have been a consensus more than once myself, and I know the business and its vicissitudes. I am a compositor expert, of old and seasoned experience. 19 years ago, I delivered the final and for good verdict that the linotype would never be able to earn its own living, nor anyone else's. It takes 14 acres of ground now to accommodate its factories in England. 35 years ago, I was an expert precious metal quartz miner. There was an outcrop in my neighborhood that assayed $600 a ton gold, but every fleck of gold in it was shut up tight and fast in an intractable and impersuadable base metal shell. Acting as a consensus, I delivered the finality verdict that no human ingenuity would ever be able to set free $2 worth of gold out of a ton of that rock. The fact is, I did not foresee the cyanide process. Indeed, I have been a consensus ever so many times since I reached maturity and approached the age of discretion, but I call to mind no instance in which I won out. These sorrows have made me suspicious of consensuses. Do you know I tremble and the goose flesh rises on my skin every time I encounter one now? I sheer warily off and get behind something, saying to myself, It looks innocent and all right, but no matter, 10 to 1 there's a cyanide process under that thing somewhere. Now as concerns this creation of life by chemical agencies. Reader, take my advice, don't you copper it. I don't say bet on it, no, I only say, don't you copper it. As you see, there is a consensus out 308 against it. If you find that you can't control your passions, if you feel that you have got to copper something and can't help it, copper the consensus. It is the safest way, all history confirms it. If you are young, you will, of course, have to put up on one side or the other, for you will not be able to restrain yourself. But as for me, I am old and I am going to wait for a new deal. P.S. In the same number of the Times, Dr. Funk says, man may be as badly fooled by believing too little as by believing too much. The hard-headed skeptic Thomas was the only disciple who was cheated. Is that the right and rational way to look at it? I will not be sure, for my memory is faulty, but it has always been my impression that Thomas was the only one who made an examination and proved a fact, while the others were accepting, or discounting, the fact on trust like any other consensus. If that is so, doubting Thomas removed a doubt which must otherwise have confused and troubled the world until now, including Dr. Funk. It seems to me that we owe that hard-headed or sound-headed witness something more than a slur. Why does Dr. Funk examine into spiritism and then throw stones at Thomas? Why doesn't he take it on trust? Has inconsistency become a jewel in Lafayette Place? Old man afraid of the consensus. Extract from Adam's diary. Then there was a consensus about it. It was the very first one. It sat 6 days and nights. It was then delivered of the verdict that a world could not be made out of 309 nothing, that such small things as sun and moon and stars might maybe, but it would take years and years, if there was considerable many of them. Then the consensus got up and looked out of the window, and there was the whole outfit spinning and sparkling in space. You never saw such a disappointed lot. His, Adamai, Mark, the dervish and the offensive. Stranger. The dervish, I will say again, and yet again and still again, that a good deed. The offensive stranger, peace and, O man of narrow vision, there is no such thing as a good deed. The dervish, O shameless blasphemy. The offensive stranger, and no such thing as an evil deed. There are good impulses, there are evil impulses, and that is all. Half of the results of a good intention are evil, half the results of an evil intention are good. No man can command the results, nor allot them. The dervish, and so. The offensive stranger, and so you shall praise men for their good intentions, and not blame them for the evils resulting. You shall blame men for their evil intentions, and not praise them for the good resulting. The dervish, O maniac, will you say? The offensive stranger, listen to the law. From every impulse, whether good or evil, flow two streams, the one carries health, the other carries poison. From the beginning of time, this law has not changed, to the end of time it will not change. The dervish, if I should strike thee dead in anger. 311. The offensive stranger. Or kill me with a drug which you hoped would give me new life and strength. The dervish, very well, go on. The offensive stranger, in either case the results would be the same. Age-long misery of mind for you an evil result. Peace, repose, the end of sorrow for me a good result. 3 hearts that hold me dear would break. 3 pauper cousins of the third removed would get my riches and rejoice. You would go to prison and your friends would grieve, but your humble apprentice priest would step into your shoes and your fat, sleek life and be happy. And are these all the goods and all the evils that would flow from the well-intended or ill-intended act that cut short my life? O thoughtless one, O purblind creature? The good and evil results that flow from any act, even the smallest, breed on, century after century, forever and ever, creeping by inches around the globe, affecting all its coming and going populations until the end of time, until the final cataclysm. The dervish, then, there being no such thing as a good deed. The offensive stranger, don't I tell you there are good intentions and evil ones and they're an end? The results are not foreseeable. They are of both kinds in all cases. It is the law. Listen, this is far western history. Voices out of Utah. 1. The white chief to his people. This wide plain was a desert. By our heaven-blessed industry, we have 312 dammed the river and utilized its waters, and turned the desert into smiling fields whose fruitage makes prosperous and happy 1,000 homes where poverty and hunger dwelt before. How noble, how beneficent is civilization. Chapter 2. Indian chief to his people. This wide plain, which the Spanish priests taught our fathers to irrigate, was a smiling field, whose fruitage made our homes prosperous and happy. The white American has dammed our river, taken away our water for his own valley, and turned our field into a desert, wherefore we starve. The dervish, I perceive that the good intention did really bring both good and evil results in equal measure. But a single case cannot prove the rule. Try again. The offensive stranger, pardon me, all cases prove it. Columbus discovered a new world and gave to the plodding poor and the landless of Europe farms and breathing space and plenty and happiness. The dervish, a good result. The offensive stranger, and they hunted and harried the original owners of the soil and robbed them, beggared them, drove them from their homes and exterminated them, root and branch. The dervish, an evil result, yes. The offensive stranger. The French Revolution brought desolation to the hearts and homes of 313 million families and drenched the country with blood and turned its wealth to poverty. The dervish, an evil result. The offensive stranger. But every great and precious liberty enjoyed by the nations of continental Europe today are the gift of that revolution. The dervish, a good result, I concede it. The offensive stranger. In our well-meant effort to lift up the Filipino to our own moral altitude with a musket, we have slipped on the ice and fallen down to his. The dervish, a large evil result. The offensive stranger, but as an offset we are a world power. The dervish, give me time, I must think this one over, pass on. The offensive stranger. By help of 300,000 soldiers and $800 million, England has succeeded in her good purpose of lifting up the unwilling Boers and making them better and purer and happier than they could ever have become by their own devices. The dervish, certainly that is a good result. The offensive stranger, but there are only 11 Boers left now. The dervish, it has the appearance of an evil result, but I will think it over before I decide. The offensive stranger, take yet one more instance. With the best intentions, the missionary has been laboring in China for 80 years. The dervish, the evil result is 314, the offensive stranger, that nearly 100,000 Chinamen have acquired our civilization. The dervish, and the good result is the offensive stranger, that by the compassion of God 400 millions have escaped it. Instructions in art. With illustrations by the author. The great trouble about painting a whole gallery of portraits at the same time is that the housemaid comes and dusts, and does not put them back the way they were before. And so when the public flock to the studio and wish to know which is Howells and which is Depew and so on, you have to dissemble, and it is very embarrassing at first. Still, you know they are there, and this knowledge presently gives you more or less confidence, and you say sternly, "This is Howells," and watch the visitor's eye. If you see doubt there, you correct yourself and try another. In time you find one that will satisfy, and then you feel relief and joy, but you have suffered much in the meantime. And you know that this joy is only temporary, for the next inquirer will settle on another Howells of a quite different aspect, and one which you suspect is Edward Roman 7 or Cromwell, though you keep that to yourself, of course. It is much better to label a portrait when you first paint it, then there is no uncertainty in your mind, and you can get bets out of the visitor and win them. I believe I have had the most trouble with a portrait which I painted in installments, the head on one canvas and the bust on another. The head on one canvas. The housemaid stood the bust up sideways, and now I don't know which way it goes. Some authorities think it belongs with the breastpin at the top, under the man's chin. Others think it belongs the reverse way, on account of the collar. One of these saying, a person can wear a breastpin on his stomach if he wants to, but he can't wear his collar anywhere he darn pleases. There is a certain amount of sense in that view of it. Still, there is no way to determine the matter for certain. When you join the installments, with the pin under the chin, that seems to be right. Then when you reverse it and bring the collar under the chin, it seems as right as ever. Whichever way you fix it, the lines come together snug and convincing, and either way you do it, the portrait's face looks equally surprised and rejoiced, and as if it wouldn't be satisfied to have it any way but just that one. In fact, even if you take the bust away altogether, the face seems surprised and happy just the same. I have never seen an expression before, which no vicissitudes could alter. I wish I could remember who it is. It looks a little like Washington, but I do not think it can be Washington, because he had as many ears on one 317 side as the other. You can always tell Washington by that. He was very particular about his ears, and about having them arranged the same old way all the time. And the bust on another. By and by I shall get out of these confusions, and then it will be plain sailing. But first off, the confusions were natural and not to be avoided. My reputation came very suddenly and tumultuously when I published my own portrait, and it turned my head a little, for indeed there was never anything like it. In a single day I got orders from 62 people not to paint their portraits, some of them the most distinguished persons in the country, the president, the cabinet, authors, governors, admirals, candidates for office on the weak side, almost everybody that was anybody. And it would really have turned the head of nearly any beginner to get so much notice and have it come with such a frenzy of cordiality. But I am growing calm and settling down to business, now, and pretty soon I shall cease to be flurried, and then, when I do a portrait I shave quite at myself, and able on the instant to tell it from the others and pick it out when wanted. I am living a new and exalted life of late. It steeps me in a sacred rapture to see a portrait develop and take soul under my hand. First, I throw off a study, just a mere study, a few apparently random lines, and to look at it, you would hardly ever suspect who it was going to be. Even I cannot tell myself. Take this picture, for instance. First you think a Tess Dante, next you think a Tess Emerson, then you think a Tess Wayne MacVeagh. Yet it isn't any of them, it's the beginnings of Depew. First you think it's Dante, next you think it's 319 Emerson, then you think it's Wayne MacVeagh. Yet it isn't any of them, it's the beginnings of Depew. Now you wouldn't believe Depew could be devolved out of that. Yet the minute it is finished here you have him to the life, and you say yourself, if that is Depew it isn't anybody. Some would have painted him speaking, but he isn't always speaking, he has to stop and think sometimes. That is a genre picture, as we say in the trade, and differs from the encaustic and other schools in various ways, mainly technical, which you wouldn't understand if I should explain them to you, but you will get the idea as I go along, and little by little you will learn all that is valuable about art without knowing how it happened, and without any sense of strain or effort, and then you will know what school a picture belongs to, just at a glance, and whether it is an animal picture or a landscape. It is then that the joy of life will begin for you. When you come to examine my portraits of Mr. Joe Jefferson and the rest, your eye will have become measurably educated by that time, and you will recognize at once that no two of them are alike. I will close the present chapter with an example of the nude, for your instruction. This creation is different from any of the other works. The others are from real life, but this is an example of still life, so called because it is a portrayal of a fancy only, a thing which has no actual and active existence. The purpose of a still life picture is to concrete to the eye the spiritual, the intangible, a 320 something which we feel, but cannot see with the fleshy vision, such as joy, sorrow, resentment, and so on. This is best achieved by the employment of that treatment which we call the impressionist in the trade. The present example is an impressionist picture, done in distemper, with a chiaroscuro motif modified by monochromatic technique, so as to secure tenderness of feeling and spirituality of expression. At a first glance it would seem to be a Botticelli, but it is not that. It is only a humble imitation of that great master of longness and slimness and lymphulness. That thing in the right hand is not a skillet, it is a tambourine. The work is imagined from Greek story, and represents Proserpine or Persepolis, or one of those other Bacchantes doing the solemnities of welcome before the altar of Isis, upon the arrival of the Anuashiplote of Athenian youths in the island of Minos, to be sacrificed in appeasement of the Dordonian Cyclops. The portrait reproduces Mr. Joseph Jefferson, the common friend of the human race. The figure symbolizes solemn joy. It is severely Greek, therefore does not call details of drapery or other factitious helps to its aid, but depends wholly upon grace of action and symmetry of contour for its effects. It is intended to be viewed from the south or southeast, and I think that that is best. 322, for while it expresses more and larger joy when viewed from the east or the north, the features of the face are too much foreshortened and wormy when viewed from that point. That thing in the right hand is not a skillet, it is a tambourine. Either Mr. Howells or Mr. Laffin, I cannot tell which because the label is lost. This creation will be exhibited at the Paris Salon in June and will compete for the Prix de Rome. The above is a marine picture and is intended to educate the eye in the important matters of perspective and foreshortening. The mountainous and bounding waves in the foreground, contrasted with the tranquil ship fading away, as in a dream the other side of the fishing pole, convey to us the idea of space and distance as no words could do. Such is the miracle wrought by that wondrous device, perspective. The portrait reproduces Mr. Joseph Jefferson, the common friend of the human race. He is fishing and is not catching anything. This is finely expressed by the moisture in the eye and the anguish of the 323 mouth. The mouth is holding back words. The pole is bamboo, the line is foreshortened. This foreshortening, together with the smoothness of the water away out there where the cork is, gives a powerful impression of distance and is another way of achieving a perspective effect.